Are you ready to make some changes in your relationship with your spouse? Hi there, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Saira, the show where I answer your questions about mental health, personal growth, and relationships. Today's question comes from Perveen. Perveen says, how can I change my expectations of my spouse? They keep letting me down, and I know that I can't change them. I can only change me. But how do I do that in the real world? How can I change my expectations of my spouse? They keep letting me down, and I know that I can't change them. I can only change me. But how do I do that in the real world? Okay, Praveen, this is a really good question. And from the question, I know that you've already done a little bit of work, right? You've already done that deep dive that we all have to do and realize can't change anyone else. I can only change myself. And so what changes do I need to make in me, right? So now, one of the things I want to say up front is if this is a situation where there's violence, and you're talking about those kinds of expectations and letting you down, then I would say none of what I'm about to say applies, because in situations of violence or abuse, a bigger intervention is needed that includes the other person as well, and then changing their behaviors as well. So I'm not talking about that context. Okay, so I want to put that up front. This is not for people listening who have that going on. Nothing that follows is going to apply to you. If you don't, if it's more like the regular bickering and back and forth of everyday life, if that's kind of what you're asking about, then that's kind of what I'm going to share about. So the first thing is there's three things. So first is about soothing. The second thing is about regulating. And then the third thing is about social support. Okay. Soothing, regulating, and social support. So let's start with soothing. When I feel let down, right? When they keep letting me down, when I feel let down, often there's a need that was gone unmet. And that's why I feel let down. So something I needed that maybe I spoke or didn't speak out loud didn't get fulfilled. And that's why I'm feeling let down. Needs come from the younger parts of us, the child parts of us, right? The adult parts of us, I mean, we're happy if we get our needs met, but we can also meet our own needs. Not that big of a deal. But the child part really needs someone else to meet their needs, right? When we're children, we can't do that for ourselves. And so the first thing to do is soothe that inner child, right? To get curious, what is the need that I have that's not being met? And how can I soothe myself? So an example might be something like, let me think. I'm trying to think an example of from my own life. Okay, here's a really simple one, and it might be a bit too simple, but let me share with you. So after a long day of work, long day and a tiring day, what I love to do is sit down in front of the TV, sometimes with my dinner, sometimes after dinner, and just watch a show. With my husband would be great. I would love for me and my husband to just sit down and watch a show that we both like after dinner. That feels to me like a reasonable request, and that feels to me like something that he should be able to do. However, I would say probably 3 times out of 4, it doesn't happen like that, because he's engaged in something else. Like right now he's involved in a lot of things, and he's really taken on some really fascinating projects. And so he's unavailable. And I knew that. But in the past, years ago, I would have gotten so frustrated that I just want this one little thing, this one little expectation, and you're not able to even do that for me. So when I dug deeper about, okay, what's really going on here? What I needed was a sense of rest. That's what I needed. And that scenario of sitting down on the couch with my partner, watching a show, that to me was symbolizing rest. And so what I really needed was rest. And so when I figured that out, that that's what I'm really looking for, then I could actually give myself rest. And so what I started to do is watch my whatever short amount of TV and actually go to bed, because what I really need is rest. And I'm getting mad at him because he's stopping me from getting what I think I want through this ritual or through this symbolic act of watching television. So just get curious about underneath the ask, what is the need? Another example of a need might be, well, he does all these things now, but like back in early days, things like change the light bulb, right? So there's a burnt out light bulb and it's burnt out. This actually doesn't apply to my relationship because he's always really good at changing light bulbs. But say, for example, I've heard this from other people that, their spouse has a task, a household task, and it's not done and it's just not done and it's not done and it's not done. And, in one of our couples sessions that we were doing, there was this kind of dynamic happening. And we dug into that a little bit to say, okay, well, what message are you getting when that task isn't done, right? And as we dug into it, what we were getting, the message that the other person was getting is, I'm not important to you. And so the need was, I need to feel important. And when we dug into it even more, finding that that person that needs to feel important wasn't really making themselves important in the rest of their day-to-day life. Okay? So now it's up to me to respond to that need, to soothe that child, to make myself important. It's up to me to give myself that rest that I'm kind of thinking and somehow I'm going to get by this activity with this person. That's what I mean when I say soothe your inner child. Take responsibility. First of all, figure out what even is going on, and then take some responsibility for how can I manage this piece. Okay. And some people have a hard time with that in relationship because they think, well, isn't that the point of being, with someone, is that they can help you out sometimes? Yes. But if you're doing it with from that place of expectation, you are going to be let down because you can't force other people to make things important to them when they're important to you. They might not be important to them. Rest for my partner, it's important to him, but he doesn't prioritize it the way I do. He has a different way of coping with his rest needs. So that's the first one. The second one is emotion regulation. Okay, so you say, how can I change my expectation of my spouse? They keep letting me down. And I know that I can't change them. So what I'm seeing when I hear this question is something happens, you're disappointed. I think that's probably the feeling word is disappointment, right? So what does disappointment feel like in your body, right? Does your heart drop? Does your energy go really low? Are you kind of hunched over? What does disappointment feel like? And then how can I move through that disappointment and not let myself sit in that disappointment for 4 hours? So that's what I mean by emotion regulation, is to actually tune in to the feeling that this is bringing up and then riding out that feeling, addressing that feeling, being with that feeling until it changes to something else. And you can do that in many ways. You can do that just by sitting with the feeling and just observing it, observing the body sensations, observing the thoughts, and just kind of watching what happens as the emotions come. That's one way. You can also do it through writing, through journaling. You can do it by venting it out, maybe in an audio note to yourself or to a friend who's kind of neutral and won't, take a side. So there's different ways that you can ride and regulate your emotions. If you're not doing that, then it builds, right? That disappointment builds on last week's disappointment, which builds on the disappointment from 2 years ago, and then when the fights happen, all of these things come bursting out that you've been holding and not saying anything about. And that is much more damaging to the relationship than simply regulating your emotions in the moment. Okay, so that's number 2. Oh, and I also want to say, it's not to say that you can never have a big feeling in front of your partner. Absolutely, that's part of life, and we want to show our authentic selves to our partners, but in a way that's not going to damage the bond, right? In a way that's not going to corrode the relationship. That's really important. The third thing I would say is around your social support, right? So if your partner, if your spouse is your main source of relational food, you're going to be hungry. If that's the only person that's filling my need for human contact, it's going to be too hard. It's a lot to put on one person to be there for you consistently, emotionally, all the time. Now, unfortunately, we've been sold a story that that's how it happens, like that one person can be your everything. It's just simply not true. We are pack mammals. We live in communities. We weren't meant to be, two lonely geese. Even the geese, right? Community. We are social mammals. So to put all of that burden of relational connection with one person is too much for that person. And eventually they'll let you down because it's too much to carry. So I would say, rather than having this rope that you're holding on to this one person with and like holding on, think of it more like a web, right? So this one person is here, but there's other people in your life and other activities in your life, other interests and hobbies in your life that also spread out your need for connection, right? And your need to be like whatever you weren't specific about what they're letting you down about, but you can ask in other places for what you need. And at the end of the day, we're the best ones to give ourselves what we need, but we do need that social contact as well. And so building that social web rather than that one rope to this one person will be very important. And it's hard to do if you've spent a lot of time just thinking it should be just all this one person. And you've been convinced, many of us have been convinced of that, right? So you have to kind of retrain yourself that it doesn't always have to be them that's fulfilling my needs or connecting with me or, going with me places or whatever. It could be other people. And it could just be sometimes just myself. So with that TV example that I gave earlier, I said 3 out of the 4 times he's not there. So, but 2 out of the 4 times my kids are there. So we end up watching a different show, right? Again, just a short amount of time so I can get to bed. But I replaced the need of company with, it doesn't have to be just him. It could be other people in the home as well, right? It doesn't have to be just this one person. And my kids are really good at saying no when they don't want to be part of that. And they're just like, no, thanks, I don't want to. So I feel like I'm not kind of forcing them because there is that different power difference, right, with children that you have to be aware of. So those are my thoughts: the soothing the inner child, regulating the emotions, and expanding your social support. Because that disappointment is not going to serve the relationship. And this is how you do that thing that you asked about, changing me in the real world. Here's 3 very practical things you can do to change things in the real world. And see if your partner notices. See if your spouse picks up on any of the changes that you're making. So those are my thoughts for today. Feel free to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Ask me a question if you want something to come up in one of our future episodes, and you can do that via email, which is at the end of the video. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.